That's right. I know that you know what book I'm about to review.
In between the lines, there's a lot of obscurity. I'm not inclined to resign to maturity.
Welcome back to Afrodo Reviews, everyone. On this channel, I help you decide. Is that book worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? That is what we're here to decide. Psych, Mind Over Magic is the second book in the published of the Psych novel series, written by William Radcliffe and released on July 1st of 2009, or July 7th, 2009, either way. This means the novel was published shortly before the fourth season of the show would air, given a full year between when the previous book was published. A mind is a terrible thing to read. That being said, the book's never really got a ton of popularity, and apart from what I mentioned in my first review, there really isn't that much more to tell you guys about the series of Psych. Well, at least these little bookisode things. There's not really much to say about them. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, and apart from it adding to Rapkin's already pretty decent bibliography of television, detectives, and novel adventures, there's not much else to speak of when it comes to this. So
In between the lines, there's a lot of obscurity. I'm not inclined to resign to maturity.
and let's move on to the cover. Now, my criticism with the book's cover is still pretty much the same as the last book I read 2 years ago. It feels like it's just relying entirely on name and face recognition rather than anything else about the work itself. The only things that are on the front is Dooley Hill and James Roday Rodriguez in character as Burton, Guster, and Shawn Spencer respectively. Both are drinking coffee from cups out of official Psych mugs, and Gus is staring at Shawn like he just revealed something dumb or he's personally offended by what's on the cup. Although, considering what's on the cup, it's just saying the psychic is in. It doesn't really make sense why he's so offended by it. It's honestly hard to tell what Gus is supposed to be reacting to in this. It tells you absolutely nothing about the book, nothing about the story and universe, nothing about the characters. Honestly, it might even be worse fitting than the previous cover, because at least the first book had the decency to give you a basic idea of Shawn and Gus's personalities and their relationship. Shawn tends to be the goofier one. He's holding the magic 8-ball to his head, which also marks him as the psychic half of this psychic sleuth, while Gus stares on in annoyance, showing that Gus tends to be the more level-headed one who's annoyed with Shawn's antics. Honestly, truth be told, these are probably just potential pictures taken for the DVD cover arts and then reused on the books. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if they were used somewhere. I just don't own any of the cover, any of the seasons or anything, so I can't tell you that for sure. With nothing else really to be said about the cover, let's just go ahead and move on and ask, what's the story about? Well, the back of the book would have you believe, trained to be a detective by his father and blessed with the astounding powers of observation and deduction, and cursed with the refusal to take anything seriously, Shawn Spencer has convinced everyone he's psychic. Now, with his best friend Gus, he's either going to clean up or be found out. When a case takes Shawn and Gus into the Fortress of Magic, an exclusive club for professional magicians where the outsiders are rarely allowed, they are treated to a private show by the hottest act on the Vegas Strip, 7-foot-tall Martian magician Patul Paka. But when the wizard does his signature illusion and dissolves in a tank of water, he never rematerializes, and in his place is a chubby corpse in a 3-piece suit and a bowler hat. Eager to keep his golden boy's image untarnished, the magician's manager hires Shawn and Gus to uncover the identity of the dead man and find out what happened to Patul Paka. But to do so, the pair will have to pose as a new mentalist act and go undercover in a world populated by magicians, mystics, Martians, madmen, and one murderer. For the most part, this is kind of telling you the truth. About the only petty point I would pick at that point would be this whole Fortress of Magic thing. They're treated to a private show by the hottest act and outsiders are rarely allowed in. That's kind of a lie, because in the first part of the book, it outright says the Fortress of Magic was like that, but hard times made them start doing more private parties, more things, so it's rented out quite often. It's not really outsiders are never allowed in, because they're allowed in all the time. Really, the main thing that's wrong with this synopsis is the last sentence. the pair will have to pose as a new mentalist act and go undercover, because that just doesn't happen in the book. They just serve as ordinary detectives in the line of work, which is interesting, but the most interesting part that the synopsis told us, where Shawn and Gus going undercover as mentalists, is just a flat lie. Honestly, if you just snipped out that final line, it'd be perfectly fine, and there's nothing to hint that this is just a lie, because this isn't out of the ordinary for Shawn and Gus to go undercover in their line of work to solve cases.
This place has electronic bidets. It's like the West End for insane people.
Will you keep your voice down? You're gonna blow our cover.
Heck, they even go undercover as carnies in another season later on. Whatever. In any case, with both of those out of the way, let's move on to the tried and true question. Does this book hold up?
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
Okay, so the first compliment I can give this book is that it is better than the first one in some senses. Shawn and
My partner, Lavender Gooms.
dynamic is much more in line with their actual chemistry in the show than it was in the first book. The first book, like I mentioned, had Gus as a whiny, unwilling tag-along to a lot of Shawn's antics, which, in hindsight, makes a lot of sense. What other series did William Rabkin famously work on and would have been actively airing when these books were published, that features one very brilliant detective and a tag-along who is a little more on the whiny side, who is an unwilling participant in much of the detective's antics? So it makes a lot of sense that when you realize the dynamic between Shawn and Gus in the first book is much more closer to Monk and his assistant's dynamic, specifically Natalie Teeger's, than it would have been Gus's and Shawn's actual dynamic. This book definitely corrects that, and it feels like William Rabkin actually went back and like, oh yeah, this is how they're supposed to act towards each other. I was thinking of Monk when I wrote the first book. So in this book, we get to see Gus clap back a lot more often, engage in shenanigans with Shawn far more often, and even a couple of times forces Shawn to bow to his desires, then reluctantly always going along with what Shawn's antics determine. Now, I still think Gus is a little too passive in the relationship, but it is still a major upgrade from the first book. I also think Shawn comes off a little less cruel in this one. As I mentioned in the last one, he still performs antics, but there's a lot more self-awareness in this book that Shawn does those as an act rather than that's how he actually is, thus allowing you to understand more this is how Shawn works, rather than necessarily being a case where Shawn just isn't reading the room right and is being cruel. It does get a little heavy-handed with the book outright spelling out that Shawn purposely missays the victim's name, Patul Pakar, throughout the book, as it just is outright telling you that Shawn is doing it on purpose to play a game with Gus. Gus commenting like, I know Shawn won't continue his point until I correct him, even though he 100% knows the real name. But we never actually get scenes where Shawn is making light of really heinous things, like in the last book when he was joking about dogfighting. Something that I cannot see Shawn in the show ever really doing. That being said, and of course, it still has the same compliments I gave the last book, in that while this book while a lot of the USA detective works tend to read like the authors took a scrapped script and just rewrote it into a book, this actually feels like the author took it and was like and created a whole new mystery just for a book. It feels like this was conceived for a book first, and maybe potentially for a series if it's good enough. And that definitely shines in the set pieces that are set throughout that. We got a lot more flair to the set pieces that you wouldn't be able to see on a show like Psych. That being said, for all that it does better or is still just as good, it still does do a lot of things wrong. Now, the first and foremost is the mystery. Now, the complaint that I had with the first book is that it felt like it was two separate ideas smashed together into one, and barely connected with the loosest strings. As if Rabkin didn't have enough material for this mystery or this mystery, so he just put them together to try to fill out the pages. Well, in this novel, he at least sticks to one main mystery, but the problem is it still feels like he doesn't have enough for one book. This, of course, leads to similar problems. Like I said last time, without the executive meddling, bits go on for way too long, causing them to lose their charm and becoming more annoying than they are funny. More than once, I was definitely on
Partner Gus Silly Pants Jackson.
side in wanting to throttle Shawn for not just being more direct with what he discovered. He was giving major vibes of Patrick Jane from The Mentalist, a character I also found really annoying in how he would discover things and then just refuse to tell anyone in the show, despite it making their lives so much easier if he just would. Unlike Jane, however, this isn't in Shawn's character. He would make a big deal about psychically divining what he had just learned. We also see a lot more needless references in this book. Shawn is noted for making several classical references, typically to movies, but this one, I don't know, it just feels like Rabkin was referencing whatever the fuck he felt like at a certain point. We get a lot of classic French literature like Les Mis and Phantom of the Opera referenced, with
Scooney, U-turn, Singleton. We're from Dirty.
Even going into a monologue about how Shawn is referencing a particular version of the latter, meaning that Shawn wouldn't be protected by copyright law if he would try to turn it into a movie like he was talking about. We also see an extended reference to Monk. We see references to a ton of superhero things. We see a ton of movie references. It gets a little out of hand. It's one of those, it's charming at first, but the more and more he does it, the more it's like, you realize Shawn's humor is more than just references, right? And again, I totally get that this idea behind this is you don't have the charisma of Dooley Hill or James O'Day Rodriguez in the shoes of Shawn Spencer and Burton Guster. So you don't really have them playing up these bits, so we're just reading them on the page. And while they do have the voice of Shawn and Gus a lot better than the previous work, it still is just words on a page. I'm not seeing characters act this out. I will say, in compliment to this book, it captures Lassie very well. In addition, we also have a couple scenes that should have been over and done with after a couple seconds, which stretch far longer than they should have been, not necessarily in the bits and references. There's a scene in this book where Juliet O'Hara has a standoff with an FCC official named Major Vogues, who is there to interfere in the investigation, and it goes on way past the point it should have, taking up a lot of valuable time that could have been spent elsewhere. There's also the subplot with Henry Spencer, Shawn's dad. It feels weirdly tacked on. Like, it feels like it was originally part of a much bigger story, and then it was changed later, so then Rabkin's like, oh, yeah, I forgot that. Here's that twist. I'm not going to use it in anything else, so there's no point. It's not relevant throughout the entire book. There's no hints that it's more than it seems, and then it's just sort of tacked on at the end where Shawn does the wrap-up. I don't feel bad for spoiling it, so basically the premise of it is Henry has Shawn delivered a package to his best friend's bachelor party because it's being held in a place that Henry is banned for being, well, Henry. After Shawn gets there, he tries to leave, but is pressed on proving his psychic powers so that he ends up revealing that the bachelor's fiancé is cheating on him with his best friend. Henry later confronts Shawn about this as if he's really angry that Shawn did this, and then the story just sort of forgets it until it's suddenly at the end where Shawn reveals, my dad manipulated me. You see, as it turns out, Henry purposely got the previous location for the bachelor party cancelled so that he can convince them to go to the Fortress of Magic. That way he had an excuse to trick Shawn into delivering his gag gift because he was banned from the Fortress of Magic. Then he knew that when Shawn would get there, Shawn would see the same signs that he did and reveal to his friend that his fiancée was cheating on him, seemingly, so that Henry didn't have to do it himself. Only, double twist, it turns out that the entire marriage was a sham to begin with. The fiancé was actually in a relationship with the friend that she supposedly was cheating on, but his green card was expired. So the supposed bachelor that was marrying her so she could get citizenship, so that way she could stay with the best friend, since he couldn't marry her because he was already technically married. See, the best friend's wife has a severe case of Alzheimer's, and the best friend knows that his marriage is effectively dead, but doesn't want to divorce his wife, or she'll lose her health insurance and be kicked out of the home she's being taken care of. So his best friend, aka the bachelor, did the marriage so he and the fiancé could be together. What did this have to do with the story?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Heck, even the opening flashback with Henry did nothing to add to the mystery. Normally these are used to show the theme of the episode or to give Shawn the last minute hint that would lead to his capture. It's not like Shawn went into the mystery thinking the world of stage magicians and then finding out they're all hacks and rubes. If anything, this book has a weird hatred of stage magicians. But all the beginning of the book serves to do is set up the thing that Henry got banned from the Fortress of Magic. And that's it. I guess you can kind of maybe put the fact that Shawn's dislike of magicians also comes from this, but that doesn't feel like that's what would happen. This is Shawn. He doubles down on stuff his dad doesn't like just because his dad hates it, even if he thinks they're personally pathetic. But I honestly think the biggest flaw of this book is definitely the mystery. Now, obviously, I can't exactly critique this part of the story without spoilers, so for all of those interested in reading the Psych books without any spoilers, please take off now. I really can't promise that the story will be better if you aren't spoilered, but I can't understand wanting to read this book, a mystery book, and still have the mystery behind it, so...
In between the lines, there's a lot of obscurity.
So the mystery is... annoying. Okay, so off the bat, the book is honest with us, and is often telling us that the most simple solution to the magician's trick is often the real answer, Occam's razor. No, that guy didn't actually guess your card you picked out at random and then somehow slipped it into your shoe with magic. It's more likely that when he dropped his deck of cards at your feet, he slipped it into your sock, then when you pick the card from the deck, all of those cards are typically just the same card. So when the reveal comes, it's actually just as straightforward as that. That's what's true of the mystery. It's one of those, I guess you won me, but much like not that complicated, just because you warned me does not make it less disappointing. There's a big mystery about how not only did the magician Patul Picard perform the dissolving man trick, but how did he leave that chubby man in his place? So to explain the trick, basically a 7-foot-tall Martian-like man climbs into a tank of water, which after a few seconds begins to dissolve him in full view of everyone. Then, after he's fully dissolved, he reappears in the audience, perfectly fine. It has the exact answer you think of if you've ever seen The Prestige, so yeah, fair warning, I guess spoilers for that too. But obviously it turns out that the illusion requires more than a single person to pull off. There's more than one Patul Picard. One goes in the tank and pretends to dissolve, while the second appears in the crowd. The chubby man found dead in the tank is actually the guy who got into the tank, who pretends to get it dissolved. But the other half sneaks into the audience through a convoluted method and pretends to be the magician all along. So how do they pull off this seemingly magic trick of dissolving? TV magic. I'm actually not kidding. It turns out the way that they were able to pull the trick off was because the two performing the act were FCC agents who were using an unapproved technology for it. Basically, it's a paper-thin TV screen that they'd slap over the tank, and then play a video of the magician dissolving while he slips out through a secret hatch. And I do mean like it's paper-thin. Shawn peels off the TV screen like one would be a plastic protector on a TV screen as we know them now. The problem I have with this in this mystery is it's not real. It's TV magic both literally and figuratively. Psych is often about disproving weird stuff like this, proving how it's done through simple means rather than going deeper into it. This would be like taking one of the main alien abduction episodes from the series proper, and then revealing that it wasn't actually aliens kidnapping these people. It was just a group of random people who found an untested flying saucer technology that the government has in order to pretend there's aliens. Duh! It's just not a satisfying conclusion to that part of the mystery is all I'm saying. Especially when it turns out the main perpetrator doesn't appear until halfway into the book, leaving very little time to suspect them and figure out on your own, oh hey, that's the person who did the murder. But then again, the story is also superhanded in the fact that she's clearly got a hand in the murder, as despite being an actual government agent who supposedly has the authority to confiscate the tank the dissolving man is performed in, she's not there on official business, she flew in on her own dime, the federal agents that are working with her are actually rent-a-cops dressed up like federal agents, and she lacks the power to actually force the SPD to do a thing she's telling them to do, which is something she admits. Basically, she's that character who's so obviously painting herself as the culprit, you just sort of assume she's a red herring. I mean, it's not supposed to be that obvious who the person was, right? And it's one thing if Rabkin wanted to go the monk route and reveal who it was at the start and see how Shawn could figure out who it was later. But he doesn't do that. Furthermore, I don't really understand the motivation or, well, how. Okay, so the scheme is concocted by a pair of co-workers / lovers. The reason they did this big magician scheme is because of the dissolving man trick, right? But we know that's television, and there's no indication the FCC employees are actual magicians beyond that. But they have a whole show on Vegas, with the dissolving man being the finale of that act. So obviously one half of them has to have some degree of magician skills to keep the audience entertained until he does the dissolving man trick. But how the dissolving man trick is accomplished also leaves questions in mind even when it's explained. So no one knows how it's done, not even the casino director. Yet the stage clearly had to be constructed to allow whoever got into the tank to escape it and slip back into the audience. This is supposed to be the chubby man mentioned on the back. He crawls in and reappears in the audience wearing his bowler hat and his three-piece suit. While Vogues appears as the Martian in her own getup, using a laundry chute in the room above to crawl in through the ceiling. No comments on how the fact that it goes from they reappear in the audience to they reappear on the ceiling floating down, but moving on. However, part of the evidence that leads Shawn and
This is my underprivileged mentee. Holla back at you.
to put all this stuff together is that during one of the shows, the chubby victim tried to assault one of the waitresses of that show. And Vogues, who was in the suit, roared at him in anger. Now, we know this is because the chubby guy is in a relationship with Vogues, but let's take a step back and think about this scene for a sec. Chubby guy is meant to be the version of the Martian magician that climbs into the tank. So the first question, why does he even go back into the audience for one? His part of the trick is done. He should just go backstage and wait. Especially because they're still dressed up. How did they get the face paint off? But two, the timing on this it doesn't make sense when you think about it. So what's led to believe that in this particular instance, the victim got into the audience and less than a minute later was groping a waitress on the ass to the point that she throws water in his face and chews him out. And then he reveals that he's a federal agent and is attempting to extort her, all while he knows his fellow federal agent and lover is literally about to reappear in the room at any second for the trick. Is this guy fucking stupid, or for that matter, how do they fool people this long to begin with the disguise? I mean, I would have forgiven it if potato identity was with a heavy use of prosthetics and stilts, but at the end it just sort of turns out to be face paint and air-filled suits, which all get stuffed into the conveniently large boots during the swap, which makes all sort of senses. But namely, if the outfit is literally just a bunch of hot air, how on earth is the ground shaking when Patur Paka enters the Fortress of Magic later? They shouldn't be any heavier than normal. They're just a suit of hot air. And why don't people recognize the face? After a certain point, you'd have to think, wait, does no one question the fact that a chubby guy goes in and a woman with a very angular face comes out? I get not recognizing anything from the neck down, but the faces would be very different. And that would be so obvious, because they're described as extremely different people. It'd be another thing if they were twins, again, like the Prestige, but all in all, I'd give this book a 5 out of 10. It's hard to hate this one, especially with as much as ranting about it. But all things considered, this bookisode isn't anything to write home about. It's dumb in a lot of places, but there is still a basic mystery. There's still enough that it doesn't necessarily outright lie to you about who did it or how. And for the most part, it's fine. That's the best thing I can say about it. It's okay. It's stepping back on it. I'm not going to remember this book in like a year. I'll forget I read this thing. Just like a mediocre episode of the show. Maybe in the moment I might have fun with it, but that's all I got. I mean, what else am I supposed to say about this thing? It's there. It exists. Boo, right, woo, yay. So yeah, that's really all I got to say about that book. With that being said, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones. See you later, everyone.